In today's video, we will be doing temperature calculations involving the three temperature scales: Celsius, Fahrenheit, and Kelvin. For our first problem, copper metal melts at 1085 degrees Celsius. What is the temperature in Kelvin? So I have our formula up top and we can talk about it very briefly. So this T sub K, that is Kelvin. T sub C is your temperature in Celsius. And then you just add 273. So these calculations are really straightforward. So if we line up our variables, we're given 1085 degrees Celsius, and it wants to know the temperature in Kelvin. Important thing to note about Kelvin, it's not degrees Kelvin, it's just Kelvin, so we forego the degrees. So when we look at our formulas, one of them that relates temperature in Kelvin is, of course, the one we have in the top right side. So we're going to plug in our values here. So temperature in Kelvin equals 1085 degrees Celsius plus this constant 273. And if you look it up on the internet, it may be listed as 273.15, and that's completely okay. For us, the 0.15 doesn't too much matter, especially because we're just starting out on these. So you can just use the 273. If we put this value in our calculator, it gives us 1358 Kelvin. And again, that's just Kelvin, that's not degrees Kelvin. In this problem, it says oxygen boils at 77.36 Kelvin. What is the temperature in degrees Celsius? So here we're starting out with Kelvin and it wants us to go to Celsius. So what we need to do is we're still going to use this formula, except we're going to rearrange it. And we're going to have where Celsius is by itself. So TK equals temperature in Celsius plus 273. I want to get Celsius on a side by itself. Therefore, I'm going to subtract 273 from both sides. So that cancels out on the right, and then I'm going to rewrite it as temperature in Celsius equals the temperature in Kelvin minus 273. So the problem gives us the Kelvin value. So this is going to equal 77.36 minus 273. And that's going to give us a value of negative 195.64 degrees Celsius. Remember, one thing to note about the Kelvin scale is it does not go below 0. There are no negative numbers in the Kelvin scale. However, in the Celsius and the Fahrenheit scale, we can most definitely have negative numbers. A dog's body temperature is 101.7 degrees Fahrenheit. What is the temperature in degrees Celsius? So dogs and cats, their body temperature is a little bit warmer than ours. So here we're going to convert Fahrenheit to Celsius. To do that, we're going to use the formula in the top right. And again, just like the others, where this TC stood for temperature in Celsius, this is going to stand for temperature in Fahrenheit. So this is where we're going to plug in our Fahrenheit number. So here we have temperature in Celsius, and the temperature in Fahrenheit, that's 101.7 minus 32, all divided by 1.8. Now, you may have seen this conversion or this formula before using 9/5. 1.8 is 9/5, so there's no problem with that. If you prefer to use the 9/5 fraction, you absolutely can. Now, here the most important thing you need to remember is your order of operations. So you do not want to put this in your calculator as 101.7 minus 32 degrees divided by 1.8. You will not get the correct answer. The answer you would get if you put it in like this would be 83.9. However, what you told your calculator to do based off of order operations is to say 32 divided by 1.8 first, and that's not correct. The first thing you want to do is subtract these two numbers up top and then divide. So if we do 101.7 minus 32 up top, that gives us 69.7 divided by 1.8, and that's going to give us 38.7, and it's asking for degrees Celsius. Okay. So again, make sure you're doing order operations. If I were to put this in my calculator, it'd be 101.7 minus 32 in parentheses, and then you can say divided by 1.8. and that should give you 38.7. So make sure you're practicing these in your calculator and doing the correct order of operations. For this problem, we have the average surface temperature on Jupiter is negative 145 degrees Celsius. What is the temperature in degrees Fahrenheit? So if we look at our formula here, we have temperature in Fahrenheit equals, now this time we're going to multiply times 1.8. So 1.8 times the temperature in degrees Celsius. Here it's negative 145. So make sure to carry that negative, okay? So times negative 145 plus 32. You're going to carry out 1.8 times a negative 145 in your calculator first, and then you're going to add 32. So 1.8 times negative 145 is negative 261 plus 32 degrees. That's going to give us a temperature value of negative 229 degrees Fahrenheit. And also, guys, another thing that you can do, aside from making sure you're plugging these into your calculator, is there's a lot of temperature conversion tools out there on the internet. Google has an amazing one. So if you ever want to check your work, you just need to go plug in negative 145 degrees Celsius to Fahrenheit in Google, and it will tell you what the answer is. So that's also an excellent way to check your work. For our last slide, we're going to kind of have to combine two different things, and that's because we have no formula that goes straight from Fahrenheit to Kelvin or Kelvin to Fahrenheit. So the lowest natural temperature ever directly recorded at ground level on Earth is 184 Kelvin at the Soviet Vostochny station, I'm not quite sure on that pronunciation, in Antarctica on July 21st, 1983. What is the temperature in degrees Fahrenheit? So again, we don't have a formula that has TK and TF in it. We can only go from TK to TC or from TF to TC. Again, we have no relationship here. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to combine some of these formulas. So the first thing we're given is Kelvin. Well, I know in the end, I want to find temperature Fahrenheit. In order to do that, I need to be given temperature Celsius. I can find temperature Celsius with Fahrenheit, or excuse me, I can find temperature Celsius with Kelvin given this top equation. So that's what we're going to do first. And again, the whole goal of this right now is to get to temperature in Celsius. So using this first equation, we're given the temperature in Kelvin, and we want to go to Celsius. So we're going to subtract 273 like we did before. And that's going to give us temperature in Celsius equals the temperature in Kelvin minus 273. Here's our temperature in Kelvin. So 184 minus 273. We put this value in our calculator, and we get the temperature in Kelvin, or excuse me, temperature in Celsius is minus 89 degrees Celsius. Okay. Now that we know the temperature in Celsius, we can finally solve for temperature in Fahrenheit. So now we can use this equation. We just have to plug in the negative 89 value that we solved for the first time. So temperature in Fahrenheit equals 1.8 times temperature in Celsius plus 32. So 1.8 times a negative 89 plus 32. Using our order of operations, we plug this in our calculator, and you should get a value of negative 128.2. And again, this is degrees Fahrenheit, and you can also check this answer via some temperature calculator conversion online as well. As always, if you have any questions, please send me a message, and I'll be more than happy to help you solve them.